Welcome to Whispered Tales by Joe, where history's most captivating stories come to life. Tonight, we journey to the heart of ancient Egypt to uncover the life and legacy of Cleopatra, the last queen of the Nile. As you settle in, let the tale of her rise to power, her passionate alliances, and her tragic fall guide you into a world long past, where the echoes of history still whisper softly through the ages. Now, let's begin our story. In the bustling and cosmopolitan city of Alexandria, Cleopatra XII was born around year 69 before Christ into the ruling Ptolemaic Dynasty, a family of Macedonian Greek origin that had governed Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. The Ptolemies were not native Egyptians. They had established their rule after Alexander's conquest and had since maintained a complex and often tenuous hold on power. Cleopatra's birth marked the continuation of a dynasty that had always walked a fine line between its Hellenistic heritage and the ancient traditions of the Egyptian people. Cleopatra was the daughter of Ptolemy XII, known as the flute player for his love of music, and an unknown mother, possibly a member of the Egyptian nobility or a concubine. Her birth into the royal family came at a time of great instability in Egypt. The Ptolemies, while maintaining their rule over Egypt, had become increasingly reliant on Rome, the emerging superpower of the Mediterranean. This dependence on Rome had created tension both within the royal family and among the Egyptian populace, who viewed their rulers as foreign overlords. Despite the challenges facing her family, Cleopatra's early life in Alexandria was one of privilege and education. Alexandria, the capital of the Ptolemaic kingdom, was a center of learning and culture, home to the famous Library of Alexandria and the Museum. It was in this intellectually vibrant environment that Cleopatra was raised, surrounded by scholars, philosophers, and politicians who would influence her development from a young age. Alexandria in Cleopatra's time was a city unlike any other. Founded by Alexander the Great, it was a melting pot of cultures, where Greek, Egyptian, and Roman influences converged. The city was known for its towering Pharaoh's Lighthouse, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, and its grand palaces and temples. It was also a city of great wealth and luxury, but beneath the surface, it was a place of political intrigue and social tension. The Ptolemaic rulers had adopted many aspects of Egyptian culture to legitimize their reign, presenting themselves as the successors to the ancient pharaohs. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, followed this tradition, portraying himself as a god-king in the Egyptian style. However, the Ptolemies remained largely Hellenistic in their culture and customs, which often alienated them from the native Egyptian population. Cleopatra, even as a child, was aware of these cultural tensions. Unlike many of her predecessors, she chose to embrace Egyptian culture more fully, learning the Egyptian language and participating in religious ceremonies. This decision would later endear her to the Egyptian people, who saw her as a true pharaoh in the ancient tradition, rather than just another foreign ruler. In this culturally rich yet politically unstable environment, Cleopatra's character began to take shape. She was a keen observer of the power dynamics within her family and the broader political landscape of Egypt. The lessons she learned during her early years would serve her well as she navigated the treacherous waters of Ptolemaic politics and eventually claimed her place as Egypt's last and most famous pharaoh. Cleopatra VI, unlike many of her predecessors, was not just a figurehead, but a deeply educated and intellectually curious individual. From a young age, Cleopatra was immersed in an environment that prioritized learning and cultural exchange, shaped by the intellectual vibrancy of Alexandria. The city, home to the Great Library and the Museum, was a beacon of knowledge in the ancient world, attracting scholars, philosophers, and scientists from across the Mediterranean. It was within this intellectually stimulating atmosphere that Cleopatra's education began. Cleopatra's tutors were among the best scholars of the time, and her education was comprehensive. She studied a wide range of subjects, including mathematics, philosophy, oratory, and astronomy, all considered essential knowledge for a ruler. However, what set Cleopatra apart from other members of the Ptolemaic dynasty was her mastery of languages. She is famously reported to have spoken as many as 9 languages fluently, including Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic, and Latin. This linguistic ability was not only a practical tool for diplomacy, but also a symbol of her respect for the diverse cultures within her realm and beyond. Cleopatra's education went beyond the standard curriculum of the time. She was deeply influenced by the multicultural environment of Alexandria, where Greek, Egyptian, and Roman cultures intersected. This exposure to diverse cultures played a significant role in shaping her worldview and political strategies. Cleopatra understood the importance of cultural symbolism and often adopted elements of Egyptian tradition in her rule, such as participating in religious rituals and presenting herself as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis. Her understanding of different cultures also extended to the political realm. Cleopatra was well versed in the political theories of her time, drawing from the works of Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, whose teachings were part of her education. This knowledge of political philosophy, combined with her first-hand observations of the volatile Ptolemaic court, honed her abilities in diplomacy, negotiation, and statecraft. Cleopatra was acutely aware of the precarious position of her dynasty and the need for strong, strategic leadership to maintain power. Cleopatra's education and early influences were instrumental in shaping her character and ambitions. Unlike her predecessors, who often relied heavily on advisors, Cleopatra took an active role in the governance of Egypt. Her deep understanding of the complexities of power, both within Egypt and in the broader Mediterranean world, allowed her to navigate the challenges of her reign with intelligence and adaptability. Her linguistic abilities and cultural awareness made her a skilled diplomat, capable of engaging with foreign powers on equal terms. This was particularly evident in her relationships with Roman leaders, such as Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, where she used her charm, intellect, and knowledge of Roman culture to forge powerful alliances. Cleopatra's ambition was not merely to survive as a ruler, but to restore Egypt to its former glory and independence. Her education had prepared her for this task, providing her with the tools to assert her authority and protect her kingdom from the ever-expanding reach of Rome. Cleopatra's early life and education thus laid the foundation for her future as one of history's most formidable and intelligent leaders. Her ability to blend the knowledge and traditions of different cultures, combined with her political acumen, allowed her to carve out a unique place in history, not just as a ruler, but as a symbol of the enduring power of intellect and ambition. By the time Cleopatra ascended to the throne, the Ptolemaic dynasty had become a shadow of its former self, plagued by internal strife, economic troubles, and the ever-looming influence of Rome. The Ptolemies, originally of Macedonian Greek origin, had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, but their reign was often marked by political intrigue, familial betrayals, and a precarious relationship with the powerful Roman Republic. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, had managed to maintain his rule largely due to Roman support, but his reign left Egypt heavily indebted to Rome, further weakening the kingdom's autonomy. Upon Ptolemy XII's death in year 51 BC, Cleopatra, then just 18 years old, was named co-ruler of Egypt alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only 10 years old. This co-rule, mandated by their father's will, was supposed to ensure the continuity of the Ptolemaic dynasty. However, the reality was far from harmonious. Cleopatra, with her intelligence, ambition, and understanding of the political landscape, quickly sought to assert herself as the dominant ruler. Her brother, however, was heavily influenced by his advisors, particularly the powerful eunuch Pothinus, who saw Cleopatra's growing influence as a threat to their own power. The early years of Cleopatra's reign were fraught with challenges as she tried to solidify her position in a court filled with rivals. Ptolemy XIII's advisors, led by Pothinus, sought to undermine Cleopatra at every turn, viewing her as a dangerous and ambitious woman who needed to be controlled. The tension between Cleopatra and her brother's faction grew to the point where open conflict became inevitable. In year 48 BCE, Cleopatra was forced to flee Alexandria after a power struggle with Ptolemy XIII's supporters. She sought refuge in Syria, where she began to gather an army of mercenaries with the aim of reclaiming her throne. Cleopatra's exile was a significant setback, but it also demonstrated her resilience and determination. Rather than accept her fate, she actively worked to regain her power, showing the political acumen and resourcefulness that would define her reign. During this time, Julius Caesar, one of Rome's most powerful generals, arrived in Alexandria in pursuit of his rival Pompey. Sensing an opportunity, Cleopatra devised a bold plan to secure Caesar's support in her bid to reclaim the throne. According to legend, she had herself smuggled into Caesar's quarters rolled up in a carpet, a dramatic and audacious gesture that immediately captured the Roman leader's attention. Cleopatra's intelligence, charm, and ambition impressed Caesar, and he agreed to support her claim to the throne. With Caesar's backing, Cleopatra returned to Alexandria to confront her brother and his advisors. The conflict between Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII culminated in the siege of Alexandria, where Caesar's forces clashed with those loyal to Ptolemy XIII. After a series of battles, Ptolemy XIII was defeated and drowned in the Nile while trying to escape, leaving Cleopatra as the undisputed ruler of Egypt. Following her victory, Cleopatra was reinstalled as queen, this time co-ruling with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, who was still a child and posed no real threat to her authority. To further solidify her position, Cleopatra began a personal and political relationship with Julius Caesar, which would have significant implications for both Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra's return to power marked the beginning of a new chapter in her reign. With Caesar's support, she was able to stabilize Egypt, strengthen her position, and embark on a series of ambitious projects aimed at restoring Egypt's prosperity. Cleopatra's struggle for power and her ultimate victory demonstrated her exceptional political skills and her ability to navigate the complex and often dangerous world of ancient politics. Her reign would continue to be shaped by her relationships with the most powerful men of her time, but it was her own intelligence and determination that secured her place in history as Egypt's last and most famous pharaoh. By year 48 BC, Cleopatra's position in Egypt was tenuous. Having been forced into exile by her younger brother Ptolemy XIII and his powerful advisors, Cleopatra found herself in a precarious situation. Ptolemy XIII, backed by his regents and the Egyptian military, had the upper hand in Alexandria, while Cleopatra gathered an army of mercenaries in Syria, preparing for a return to power. The political landscape of the ancient world was complex, and Cleopatra knew that to reclaim her throne, she needed a powerful ally. It was during this time that Julius Caesar, one of Rome's most formidable generals, arrived in Alexandria in pursuit of his rival, Pompey. Cleopatra recognized that Caesar held the key to her return to power, and she devised a daring plan to win his favor. Cleopatra's decision to approach Caesar was a calculated risk. She understood that her brother's control of Alexandria and the Ptolemaic court made it impossible for her to negotiate openly. Instead, she needed to make a dramatic entrance that would capture Caesar's attention and demonstrate her resourcefulness and determination. According to the famous legend, Cleopatra arranged to be smuggled into Caesar's quarters rolled up in a carpet, or in some accounts, a linen sack. The imagery of the young queen, hidden and vulnerable, being unrolled before the Roman general is one of the most enduring stories from antiquity. This audacious move was not just a clever way to circumvent her enemies. It was also a powerful statement of Cleopatra's character. By presenting herself directly to Caesar, Cleopatra bypassed the Julius Caesar, a seasoned general and politician, was no stranger to power struggles and political intrigue. However, even he was taken aback by Cleopatra's bold approach. Impressed by her intelligence, courage, and ambition, Caesar saw in Cleopatra a valuable ally in his own plans for the Eastern Mediterranean. He recognized that supporting Cleopatra's claim to the throne of Egypt would secure a powerful ally in a strategically important region, and would also provide him with the resources and wealth that Egypt had to offer. Cleopatra's audacity and determination not only impressed Caesar, but also aligned with his own goals. Their meeting marked the beginning of a powerful alliance that would shape the future of both Egypt and Rome. Caesar agreed to support Cleopatra's claim to the throne, and together they planned to defeat Ptolemy XIII and restore Cleopatra as the Queen of Egypt. This alliance, forged in the intimate and tense atmosphere of their first meeting, would have far-reaching consequences for both Cleopatra and the Roman Republic. The alliance between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar was more than just a romantic entanglement. It was a calculated political strategy that significantly impacted the power dynamics in both Rome and Egypt. For Cleopatra, her relationship with Caesar provided her with the military and political support she needed to secure her throne and stabilize Egypt after years of internal strife. With Caesar's backing, Cleopatra was able to eliminate her rivals, including her brother Ptolemy XII, and re-establish herself as the unchallenged ruler of Egypt. In Egypt, the alliance with Caesar allowed Cleopatra to consolidate her power and implement reforms that strengthened her kingdom. Caesar's influence helped to ensure that Cleopatra's rule was recognized and respected, not only in Egypt, but also throughout the Mediterranean world. The presence of Roman troops in Alexandria and the personal relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra sent a clear message to her enemies. Cleopatra was under the protection of Rome's most powerful general. This alliance provided Cleopatra with the security and stability she needed to focus on governing and revitalizing Egypt's economy, culture, and military. In Rome, however, the relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra was met with a mix of fascination, envy, and alarm. Caesar's decision to align himself with Cleopatra, a foreign queen, and to openly acknowledge their son, Khazarian, as his own, caused a stir among the Roman elite. Many of Caesar's rivals and allies were concerned that his relationship with Cleopatra signaled a shift in his ambitions, from being the leader of Rome to potentially establishing a new dynasty that could rule both Rome and Egypt. The Roman Republic was already under significant strain due to internal conflicts and the concentration of power in the hands of a few individuals like Caesar. His relationship with Cleopatra exacerbated these tensions, as it raised questions about his loyalty to Rome and his intentions for the future. Cleopatra, with her intelligence and political acumen, was seen by many in Rome as a threat to the traditional Roman values and the balance of power within the Republic. The alliance also affected Caesar's relationships with other powerful figures in Rome. Mark Antony, who would later form his own relationship with Cleopatra, initially saw her as a rival for Caesar's attention and favor. Other members of the Senate, particularly those who were already opposed to Caesar's growing power, used his relationship with Cleopatra as a pretext to undermine him. The perception that Caesar was being influenced by a foreign queen fueled the conspiracies that ultimately led to his assassination in 44 BCE. For Cleopatra, the alliance with Caesar was a masterstroke that secured her position as the Queen of Egypt. It provided her with the resources and legitimacy she needed to rule effectively and to protect Egypt's independence in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. Cleopatra's ability to maintain her alliance with Caesar, even as it caused turmoil in Rome, demonstrated her skill as a politician and a ruler. However, the alliance also tied Cleopatra's fate to that of Caesar, and by extension, to the turbulent politics of Rome. While the relationship brought immediate benefits to Cleopatra and Egypt, it also made her vulnerable to the shifting fortunes of Roman politics. After Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra's position became more precarious, as she had to navigate a new and dangerous political landscape without the support of her most powerful ally. In summary, the alliance between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar was a pivotal moment in the history of both Egypt and Rome. It reshaped the political landscape of the Mediterranean world, strengthened Cleopatra's position as a ruler, and contributed to the growing tensions within the Roman Republic that would eventually lead to its downfall. In year 47 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Ptolemy XIV Philopator Caesar, more commonly known as Khazarian, meaning Little Caesar. The birth of Khazarian was a pivotal moment in Cleopatra's reign, as it not only solidified her alliance with Julius Caesar, but also provided a direct heir to the Ptolemaic throne. Cleopatra was quick to recognize the significance of her son's birth, both for her own position as queen and for the future of the Ptolemaic dynasty. By publicly acknowledging Khazarian as the son of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra sought to secure her lineage and strengthen her political position in Egypt. For Cleopatra, Khazarian represented the continuation of the Ptolemaic line, with a direct connection to Rome's most powerful figure. This connection was vital for Cleopatra, as it helped to legitimize her rule in the eyes of both the Egyptian people and the wider Mediterranean world. Cleopatra was well aware of the power of symbolism, and by naming her son after Caesar, she was sending a clear message. The future of Egypt was intrinsically linked to Rome, and she was the key to that connection. The birth of Khazarian allowed Cleopatra to further consolidate her power in Egypt. With Caesar's backing, she was able to portray herself as the mother of the future ruler of Egypt, ensuring her position as the queen regent. Cleopatra presented Khazarian as the embodiment of the union between Egypt and Rome, a symbol of the future prosperity and stability of the kingdom. This strengthened her image as a powerful and legitimate ruler, both in the eyes of her subjects and in the political landscape of the ancient world. Cleopatra used the birth of Khazarian to bolster her authority, portraying herself not only as a political leader, but also as a mother protecting the future of Egypt. She capitalized on the traditional Egyptian reverence for motherhood and fertility, drawing parallels between herself and the goddess Isis, who was often depicted as a mother figure. This association further endeared Cleopatra to the Egyptian people, reinforcing her position as a pharaoh in the Egyptian tradition. In Rome, however, the birth of Khazarian was met with a mix of reactions. While Julius Caesar's close allies and supporters might have seen it as a symbol of his influence and reach, many in the Roman Senate and among Caesar's rivals viewed the child with suspicion and fear. The idea that Caesar might establish a new dynasty, with Cleopatra and Khazarian at its center, was alarming to those who were already wary of Caesar's growing power and ambition. The Roman Republic was fiercely protective of its traditions, including the rejection of monarchy and the concentration of power in a single ruler. Khazarian's birth, and Caesar's acknowledgement of him as his son, challenged these values and added to the concerns that Caesar was seeking to establish himself as a king or even a godlike figure. The presence of Cleopatra and Khazarian in Rome during this period was a constant reminder of Caesar's ties to Egypt and his potential plans for a new order, one that could see Rome and Egypt united under a single dynasty. The implications of Khazarian's birth extended beyond Egypt and Rome, as they foreshadowed the eventual conflicts that would arise following Caesar's assassination. While Cleopatra saw Khazarian as the future of her dynasty in Rome, his existence fueled the fears and conspiracies that ultimately contributed to the downfall of Julius Caesar and the beginning of the end of the Roman Republic. On March 15, year 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was assassinated by a group of Roman senators in a conspiracy led by Brutus and Cassius. The murder of Caesar sent shockwaves throughout the Roman Empire and had profound implications for Cleopatra, who had relied heavily on Caesar's support to secure her position as the Queen of Egypt. Cleopatra was in Rome at the time of the assassination, residing in Caesar's villa with her son, Khazarian. The sudden and violent death of Caesar threw Cleopatra's plans into disarray and placed her in a precarious position. Without Caesar's protection, Cleopatra was vulnerable to the shifting political tides in Rome, where many viewed her with suspicion and hostility. Cleopatra understood that her presence in Rome was now dangerous. She needed to return to Egypt as quickly as possible to secure her throne and protect her son, Khazarian, who was seen by some as a potential heir to Caesar and therefore a threat to the Roman Republic. Cleopatra's swift return to Egypt was a strategic move to distance herself from the chaos in Rome and to consolidate her power in her homeland. Upon her return to Egypt, Cleopatra took decisive actions to strengthen her position and safeguard her son's future. She moved quickly to neutralize any potential threats to her rule, including securing the loyalty of the Egyptian military and political elite. Cleopatra's primary concern was to ensure that Egypt remained stable and that her reign was uncontested. She also needed to protect Khazarian, who was not only her son but also a symbol of her connection to Caesar and, by extension, to Rome. In the wake of Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra sought to maintain Egypt's independence while navigating the dangerous and shifting alliances in Rome. She was acutely aware that her position as queen was now more vulnerable than ever, especially with the emergence of new power players in Rome, such as Mark Antony and Octavian, later Augustus. Cleopatra's focus was on preserving Egypt's sovereignty and ensuring that her son would one day succeed her as the ruler of Egypt. The power vacuum left by Caesar's assassination led to a period of intense political maneuvering and conflict in Rome. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar had placed her in the middle of these power struggles, and she needed to tread carefully to avoid becoming a pawn in the conflicts between Rome's leading figures. The emergence of the Second Triumvirate, composed of Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, marked a new phase in Roman politics, one that would have significant implications for Cleopatra and Egypt. Cleopatra's eventual alliance with Mark Antony, one of the leaders of the Second Triumvirate, was a direct response to the changing power dynamics in Rome. This alliance, however, would come with its own set of challenges and ultimately lead to one of the most famous and tragic episodes in ancient history. Cleopatra's ability to adapt to the shifting political landscape was a testament to her intelligence and resilience, but it also underscored the precarious nature of her position as a foreign ruler in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. The first meeting between Cleopatra and Mark Antony took place in 41 BCE in the city of Tarsus, in present-day Turkey. At this time, Rome was still reeling from the assassination of Julius Caesar, and the power vacuum had led to the formation of the Second Triumvirate, composed of Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. Mark Antony, who controlled the eastern provinces of the Roman Republic, summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus to answer accusations that she had supported his rival, Cassius, during the recent civil war. Cleopatra, ever the astute politician, saw this as an opportunity to forge a new alliance that could secure her position in Egypt and protect her interests against Rome's growing power. Cleopatra arrived in Tarsus in a manner designed to impress and seduce Antony. According to Plutarch, she sailed up the Cydnus River on a luxurious barge, adorned like the goddess Aphrodite, with sails of purple and a gilded stern, as musicians played and incense filled the air. Antony, known for his love of luxury and spectacle, was immediately captivated by Cleopatra's charm, wit, and intelligence. This first meeting laid the groundwork for a powerful alliance, both political and romantic, that would shape the future of the Eastern Mediterranean. The initial alliance between Cleopatra and Antony was built on mutual political and strategic interests. For Cleopatra, aligning herself with Antony, one of the most powerful men in Rome, was essential for securing her throne and maintaining Egypt's independence in a world increasingly dominated by Roman influence. Cleopatra needed a strong Roman ally to protect her kingdom from internal and external threats, particularly from Rome itself. She also sought to restore Egypt's economic prosperity, which had been severely weakened by years of civil war and Roman demands for tribute. For Mark Antony, the alliance with Cleopatra offered several significant advantages. Firstly, Egypt was a wealthy and strategically important kingdom, with vast resources that Antony could use to fund his military campaigns and ambitions in the East. The alliance with Cleopatra also provided Antony with a stable and secure base of operations in the Eastern Mediterranean, from which he could exert control over the region. Moreover, Cleopatra's naval fleet was one of the most powerful in the Mediterranean, and her support was crucial for Antony's plans to challenge Octavian for control of Rome. Their relationship quickly deepened, and Antony spent the winter of 41 to 40 BCE in Alexandria with Cleopatra, indulging in the city's luxury and participating in the famous festivities known as the Inimitable Livers. During this time, the bond between Cleopatra and Antony grew stronger, cementing their alliance both politically and romantically. This alliance would prove to be a formidable force in the years to come, as they would challenge Octavian for supremacy in Rome, ultimately leading to one of the most famous and tragic conflicts in ancient history. The relationship between Cleopatra and Mark Antony quickly evolved from a strategic alliance into one of the most famous romantic partnerships in history. Following their first meeting in Tarsus in 41 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra's bond deepened as they spent more time together, particularly during Antony's extended stays in Alexandria. Their relationship was not merely one of convenience or political necessity. It was also marked by a genuine affection and shared ambitions. Cleopatra, with her intelligence, charm, and political acumen, captivated Antony, while he, in turn, offered her the military support and political legitimacy she needed to secure her throne. Their relationship was characterized by a blend of love and mutual benefit. Antony, a man known for his love of luxury and indulgence, found in Cleopatra a partner who could match his tastes and ambitions. Cleopatra, on the other hand, recognized that Antony was not just a powerful ally, but also a man who could help her achieve her goals of expanding Egypt's influence and securing her dynasty. Together, they formed a powerful duo, both romantically and politically, that would leave a lasting impact on the ancient world. The political and military alliance between Cleopatra and Antony allowed them to dominate the eastern Mediterranean region. Antony, as one of the members of the Second Triumvirate, had control over the eastern provinces of the Roman Republic, while Cleopatra ruled over Egypt, one of the wealthiest and most strategically important kingdoms of the time. Together, they combined their resources, military might, and political influence to create a formidable power bloc that challenged the authority of Rome. Cleopatra's influence over Antony was significant. She supported him not only with her wealth and naval power, but also with her strategic advice and political networks. In return, Antony granted Cleopatra territories that extended Egypt's borders, including parts of Cyprus, Crete, and Libya, as well as territories in the Levant. This expansion of Cleopatra's realm was a clear indication of their shared ambitions and the strength of their partnership. Their joint rule was also marked by grand displays of power and wealth, as seen in their famous Donations of Alexandria in 34 BCE, where Antony publicly declared Cleopatra as the Queen of Kings and recognized her son Khazarian as the legitimate heir of Julius Caesar. This event, held in Alexandria, symbolized their dominance in the Eastern Mediterranean and their aspirations to create a new world order, with Alexandria as the center of power. The partnership between Cleopatra and Antony was driven by mutual ambitions that went beyond mere survival or political convenience. Cleopatra sought to restore Egypt to its former glory and to secure a future for her dynasty, particularly for her son, Khazarian. Antony, on the other hand, saw in Cleopatra and Egypt the resources and support he needed to challenge Octavian for control of the Roman Empire. Together, they envisioned a vast empire that would rival Rome, with Cleopatra and Antony at its helm. However, their ambitions also made them formidable enemies in Rome, particularly for Octavian, who saw their partnership as a direct threat to his own power. The Roman Senate, influenced by Octavian's propaganda, increasingly viewed Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign queen who was corrupting Antony and leading him astray. This propaganda campaign would eventually lead to their downfall, as Octavian skillfully portrayed their relationship as a betrayal of Roman values and used it to rally support against them. In conclusion, the political and romantic partnership between Cleopatra and Mark Antony was a powerful alliance that shaped the course of history in the Eastern Mediterranean. Their joint rule over the region, driven by mutual ambitions and marked by grand displays of power, challenged the authority of Rome and set the stage for one of the most dramatic conflicts of the ancient world. As the Roman Republic descended into chaos following the assassination of Julius Caesar, the struggle for control of Rome intensified, leading to the Roman Civil War. Cleopatra and Mark Antony found themselves on one side of this conflict, firmly opposed to Octavian, the adopted son and heir of Julius Caesar. Their opposition to Octavian was not only a personal battle for power, but also a clash of ideologies and visions for the future of Rome and the Mediterranean world. Antony's alliance with Cleopatra became a significant focal point in the Civil War. Octavian, who sought to consolidate his power and eliminate any rivals, used propaganda to portray Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign influence who had bewitched Antony and turned him against Rome. This propaganda was effective in rallying support against Antony and Cleopatra, framing the conflict as a struggle to protect Roman values from the corruption of an Eastern queen. Cleopatra's support for Antony was crucial in the Civil War. She provided him with substantial financial resources, naval power, and military support, making Egypt the base of operations for their campaign against Octavian. Cleopatra's fleet, one of the largest and most powerful in the Mediterranean, played a key role in their military strategy, allowing them to challenge Octavian's forces on multiple fronts. Cleopatra and Antony's military strategy during the Civil War relied heavily on their control of the Eastern Mediterranean. Egypt, with its vast resources and strategic location, served as the primary base of operations for their campaign. From Alexandria, Antony and Cleopatra could launch naval expeditions, supply their armies, and coordinate their efforts against Octavian's forces. One of the key moments in the Civil War was the Battle of Actium in year 31 BCE, where Cleopatra's fleet played a central role. Antony and Cleopatra positioned their forces near the Greek coast, hoping to draw Octavian's fleet into a decisive naval battle. However, the battle did not go as planned. Despite their initial advantages, Antony and Cleopatra were outmaneuvered by Octavian's admiral, Agrippa, who used superior tactics and knowledge of the local waters to gain the upper hand. The defeat at Actium was a turning point in the Civil War. Cleopatra and Antony were forced to retreat to Alexandria, where they made their final stand against Octavian's forces. The loss at Actium not only weakened their military position, but also undermined their political authority, leading to defections among their allies and the eventual collapse of their resistance. Despite their defeat, Cleopatra and Antony's role in the Roman Civil War was significant. Their alliance represented a formidable challenge to Octavian's ambitions, and their efforts nearly succeeded in changing the course of Roman history. The Civil War marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire, with Octavian, later Augustus, emerging as the sole ruler of Rome. Cleopatra and Antony's defeat, however, also marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Egypt's integration into the Roman Empire. As the struggle for control of Rome intensified, Octavian recognized that his greatest challenge lay in defeating the formidable alliance of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. However, he knew that military might alone would not be enough to secure his victory. He needed to win the hearts and minds of the Roman people. To achieve this, Octavian launched a highly effective propaganda campaign aimed at undermining the credibility and reputation of Cleopatra and Antony, portraying them as threats to Roman values and the stability of the Republic. Octavian's propaganda was ruthless and pervasive. He depicted Cleopatra as a seductive and manipulative Eastern queen who had bewitched Antony, leading him away from his duties as a Roman leader. Cleopatra was portrayed as the embodiment of foreign decadence and corruption, a woman who threatened the very foundations of Roman society. Antony, once a respected Roman general, was cast as a traitor who had abandoned his Roman heritage and succumbed to the charms of a foreign queen. Octavian's propaganda emphasized that Antony was no longer a true Roman, but a puppet of Cleopatra, willing to betray his country for her. One of the most effective pieces of propaganda was the claim that Antony intended to move the capital of the Roman Empire to Alexandria and establish a new Eastern dynasty with Cleopatra as queen. This idea played on the deep-seated fears of Roman citizens who believed that Antony's actions threatened the very existence of Rome as they knew it. Octavian skillfully used these fears to rally support against Antony and Cleopatra, framing the conflict not just as a civil war, but as a battle for the survival of Rome. The propaganda war waged by Octavian played a crucial role in the eventual downfall of Cleopatra and Antony. By the time the Battle of Actium took place in year 31 BC, public opinion in Rome had largely turned against Antony, and he found himself increasingly isolated. The narrative that Octavian had crafted, that Antony had betrayed Rome for Cleopatra, resonated with the Roman Senate and the people, making it difficult for Antony to garner the support he needed. The defeat at Actium and the subsequent fall of Alexandria in year 30 BCE marked the end of Cleopatra and Antony's power. Both would ultimately take their own lives rather than be paraded through Rome as captives. However, their deaths did not mark the end of their story. The propaganda campaign that had contributed to their downfall also shaped their legacy in Roman history. In the years following their deaths, Octavian, who would later become Emperor Augustus, ensured that the narrative of Cleopatra as a dangerous seductress and Antony as a misguided traitor remained the dominant interpretation. This narrative served to justify Octavian's rise to power and the establishment of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra and Antony became symbols of the dangers of abandoning Roman virtues and succumbing to the allure of foreign influences. In conclusion, the propaganda war led by Octavian was not just a tool for winning the Roman Civil War. It was a powerful weapon that shaped the legacy of Cleopatra and Antony for centuries to come. By casting them as villains in the story of Rome's rise, Octavian ensured that their names would be remembered, but not as the powerful rulers they once were. Instead, they became cautionary tales of the consequences of defying Rome and its values. By the late 30s BC, the alliance between Cleopatra and Mark Antony had become a significant force in the Eastern Mediterranean, posing the direct challenge to Octavian's ambition to consolidate power in Rome. The relationship between Antony and Cleopatra was not only a personal and romantic one, but also a political and military alliance that threatened the delicate balance of power within the Roman Republic. The tension between Octavian and Antony had been brewing for years, exacerbated by the growing influence of Cleopatra in Antony's decisions. Octavian, ever the shrewd politician, capitalized on this tension by launching a propaganda campaign that portrayed Antony as having been seduced by Cleopatra, abandoning his Roman duties for the luxuries and decadence of the East. This portrayal struck a chord with the Roman Senate and the people of Rome, many of whom were already suspicious of foreign influences and wary of the growing power of Egypt. In 32 BCE, the conflict escalated when Octavian illegally obtained and publicized Antony's will, which reportedly declared that he wished to be buried in Alexandria alongside Cleopatra, and that he had left significant Roman territories to Cleopatra and her children. This revelation was the final straw for the Roman Senate, which declared war on Cleopatra. Octavian framed this as a war against a foreign queen, not against a fellow Roman, thereby avoiding a civil war narrative and rallying support against Cleopatra and Antony. As the threat of war became imminent, both sides began extensive preparations. Cleopatra and Antony assembled one of the largest naval forces ever seen in the ancient world, consisting of more than 500 ships, many of which were heavily armed and designed for ramming enemy vessels. Cleopatra also contributed a vast amount of wealth to finance the war effort, demonstrating her commitment to the cause and the survival of her kingdom. The Eastern Mediterranean, with its strategic locations, became the focal point of their military preparations. Antony and Cleopatra understood that control over the sea routes and key ports would be crucial in maintaining their supply lines and countering Octavian's forces. They established their base at Actium, a promontory on the western coast of Greece, where they could control access to the Ionian Sea and the Adriatic, effectively positioning themselves to intercept Octavian's naval forces. On the other side, Octavian, with the aid of his trusted general Agrippa, prepared meticulously for the coming conflict. Agrippa's naval prowess was well known, and he began by capturing key ports along the western coast of Greece, thereby cutting off Antony and Cleopatra's supply lines and isolating their forces. Octavian's fleet, though smaller in number, was more agile and maneuverable, designed for quick strikes rather than heavy confrontations. This difference in naval strategy would prove to be a critical factor in the upcoming battle. The Eastern Mediterranean was not only a battleground, but also a region of immense strategic importance. It was the gateway between East and West, controlling trade routes, grain supplies, and the movement of military forces. For Cleopatra, maintaining control over Egypt and the Eastern Mediterranean was essential for her survival and the preservation of her dynasty. For Antony, the region represented the key to consolidating his power and potentially establishing a new Roman order centered around Alexandria. The build-up to the Battle of Actium was marked by careful planning, strategic positioning, and a race to control the vital resources of the Mediterranean. Both sides knew that the outcome of this conflict would determine the future of Rome, Egypt, and the entire region. On September 2, 31 BCE, one of the most significant naval battles in ancient history took place off the coast of Actium, in western Greece. This confrontation between the forces of Octavian and the combined fleets of Cleopatra and Mark Antony would determine the future of Rome and Egypt. The battle was not just a clash of naval forces, but also a decisive moment in the struggle for power between Octavian and the alliance of Antony and Cleopatra. The battle was fought primarily on the water, with both sides employing different naval tactics based on the strengths of their fleets. Cleopatra and Antony commanded a fleet of over 500 ships, many of which were large and heavily armed with battering rams and artillery. These ships were designed for close combat, where their size and firepower could be used to devastating effect. Antony's plan was to draw Octavian's smaller and more maneuverable ships into a direct engagement, where the sheer size and strength of his vessels could overwhelm them. Octavian, however, had a different strategy. His fleet, led by his capable admiral Agrippa, was composed of smaller, faster ships that were more suited to hit-and-run tactics. Octavian's ships were also equipped with grappling hooks and boarding devices, allowing his soldiers to board enemy vessels and engage in hand-to-hand combat. Agrippa's plan was to use the agility of his fleet to outmaneuver Antony's larger ships, striking quickly and retreating before Antony could bring his full force to bear. The battle began with both fleets forming up in the Ionian Sea, just outside the Gulf of Ambracia. Antony's fleet was positioned to block Octavian's advance, with Cleopatra's Egyptian fleet held in reserve. As the battle commenced, Agrippa launched a series of feints and quick strikes, attempting to break Antony's formation. Antony, realizing that his larger ships were struggling to keep pace with Agrippa's maneuvers, ordered his ships to close the distance and engage in a direct confrontation. However, a critical moment occurred when Cleopatra, seeing the tide of battle turning against them, made the fateful decision to withdraw her fleet from the engagement. Historians have debated her motives, whether it was a prearranged plan with Antony or a sudden decision made out of fear for her own safety. But the result was disastrous for Antony. As Cleopatra's fleet retreated, Antony's forces were thrown into confusion. Many of his ships, seeing their queen's departure, began to break ranks and follow her, leading to a collapse in Antony's battle line. Agrippa, sensing the opportunity, pressed the attack, cutting off Antony's remaining forces and driving them toward the coast. Antony, now realizing the full extent of the disaster, attempted to regroup, but it was too late. His fleet was surrounded and systematically destroyed by Agrippa's forces. By the end of the day, the sea was littered with the wreckage of Antony's once mighty fleet, and the battle was effectively over. The Battle of Actium was marked by several turning points, the most significant being Cleopatra's decision to withdraw her fleet. This act not only demoralized Antony's forces, but also signaled to Octavian that the alliance between Antony and Cleopatra was faltering. Antony's attempts to rally his forces after Cleopatra's departure were in vain, and his decision to follow her rather than continue the fight sealed his fate. Cleopatra's role in the battle has been the subject of much speculation and criticism. Some historians argue that her withdrawal was a calculated move to preserve her fleet and ensure her survival in the face of inevitable defeat. Others suggest that it was a moment of panic that cost Antony the battle and ultimately led to their downfall. Regardless of her motives, Cleopatra's actions at Actium were pivotal in determining the outcome of the battle and the subsequent course of history. In contrast, Octavian's leadership and Agrippa's tactical brilliance were decisive in securing victory. Agrippa's ability to outmaneuver Antony's larger fleet and exploit the weaknesses in his strategy demonstrated the superiority of Octavian's forces. The victory at Actium not only destroyed Antony's naval power, but also solidified Octavian's position as the unchallenged ruler of Rome. The Battle of Actium marked a devastating defeat for Cleopatra and Antony, leading to a rapid unraveling of their military and political power. In the immediate aftermath of the battle, Cleopatra, and Antony were forced to retreat to Alexandria, their last stronghold in the face of Octavian's advancing forces. The retreat was not just a physical withdrawal, but also a significant psychological blow to both leaders and their remaining followers. The impact of their defeat at Actium was profound. Antony's once mighty fleet was decimated, and his remaining forces were demoralized and scattered. Many of his soldiers, seeing the hopelessness of their situation, began to desert or switch allegiance to Octavian. Cleopatra, too, faced the collapse of her dreams of expanding Egypt's influence and securing her dynasty. The retreat to Alexandria was a retreat from the grand ambitions that had driven both leaders, and it marked the beginning of the end for their reign. The psychological toll of the defeat was immense. For Antony, the retreat to Alexandria was a bitter acknowledgement of the failure of his military and political strategies. His reputation as a formidable Roman general was in tatters, and he was now seen as a defeated man, clinging to the last vestiges of his power. Antony's despair deepened as he realized that his decisions at Actium had not only cost him his army, but also his honor and standing in Rome. Cleopatra, too, was deeply affected by the loss. The retreat to Alexandria represented the collapse of her long-held aspirations of creating a powerful Eastern empire with Antony. The defeat shattered her hopes of securing a future for her son, Khazarian, and the Ptolemaic dynasty. Cleopatra's psychological state during this time was one of desperation and determination to protect what little remained of her kingdom. Upon their return to Alexandria, Cleopatra and Antony made frantic efforts to prepare the city for the inevitable siege by Octavian's forces. They knew that Alexandria, with its formidable defenses and strategic location, would be their last chance to hold off Octavian. Cleopatra began stockpiling supplies, reinforcing the city's walls, and rallying her remaining forces for a final stand. Antony, though disheartened, threw himself into the task of organizing the city's defenses. He sought to inspire his troops, despite the overwhelming odds against them, and attempted to negotiate with some of his former allies to join him in defending Alexandria. However, the writing was on the wall. Octavian's forces were advancing with relentless determination, and the chances of holding out were slim. In their final days in Alexandria, Cleopatra and Antony were acutely aware that the end was near. Their preparations were as much about delaying the inevitable as they were about making a final, desperate bid to retain their power. The psychological strain of knowing that their fate was sealed weighed heavily on both leaders, leading them to consider their options as Octavian's forces closed in. By 30 BC, Alexandria, the last stronghold of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, was surrounded by Octavian's forces. The city, once a beacon of wealth, culture, and power, was now a city under siege. Cleopatra and Antony, having exhausted all their options, faced the grim reality that their reign was coming to an end. The final days of Alexandria were marked by despair, desperation, and the looming presence of inevitable defeat. The fall of Alexandria was swift and decisive. Octavian, with his superior forces and strategic advantage, launched an assault on the city that left little room for resistance. Antony, still attempting to rally his remaining forces, was outmatched and outmaneuvered. The city's defenses crumbled under the weight of Octavian's legions, and soon Alexandria was overrun. As Alexandria fell, Antony faced the collapse of his military and political power. Disheartened by the defeat and the apparent betrayal by his troops, Antony attempted to rally what remained of his forces for a final stand, but the situation was hopeless. In a state of despair, Antony received false news that Cleopatra had taken her own life. Devastated by the thought of losing her, Antony decided to follow suit and fell on his sword. However, Antony did not die immediately. He was gravely wounded. Upon hearing that Cleopatra was still alive, Antony had himself carried to her quarters, where he died in her arms, telling her that he had lived a soldier and should die a soldier's death. His death marked the end of the last significant resistance to Octavian, leaving Cleopatra to face her own fate alone. As the city fell, Cleopatra made one last attempt to secure her survival and that of her children. She sought to negotiate with Octavian, hoping to find a way to preserve her life and possibly maintain some form of power in Egypt. However, Octavian was not inclined to show mercy. He viewed Cleopatra as a political liability, a symbol of the Eastern threat to Roman authority, and a potential rallying point for future dissent. Realizing that Octavian had no intention of sparing her, Cleopatra made the fateful decision to end her life, rather than be paraded through Rome as a conquered queen. According to historical accounts, Cleopatra, dressed in her royal attire, took her own life using the bite of an asp, a venomous snake, thus sealing her fate and that of Egypt. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic Dynasty and the beginning of Egypt's incorporation into the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's death had a profound impact on the ancient world. Her reign, though marked by controversy and conflict, was also a time of cultural and political significance for Egypt. Cleopatra was a ruler who sought to protect her kingdom's sovereignty in the face of growing Roman power, and her efforts to align with powerful Roman figures like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were part of a broader strategy to secure Egypt's future. However, Cleopatra's legacy was largely shaped by her enemies. Octavian, who would become the first Roman Emperor Augustus, ensured that Cleopatra was remembered as a cautionary tale, a symbol of the dangers of foreign influence and the perils of challenging Roman authority. The image of Cleopatra as a seductive and manipulative queen became ingrained in Roman and later Western literature and art, overshadowing the complexity of her character and her achievements as a ruler. The fall of Alexandria and the death of Cleopatra marked the end of an era in ancient history. Egypt, once a powerful and independent kingdom, became a province of the Roman Empire, and Cleopatra's dream of an Eastern empire that could rival Rome was extinguished. Yet, her story endures as one of the most fascinating and tragic tales of the ancient world, a testament to the enduring power of ambition, love, and the quest for survival in the face of overwhelming odds. In the twilight of her reign, Cleopatra sat alone in the echoing halls of her palace, where once the laughter of courtiers and the murmurs of intrigue had filled the air. Now only silence remained, thick and heavy, like the dusk that fell outside her window. The grandeur of Alexandria, once a beacon of power and culture, seemed to fade with each passing hour, mirroring the slow extinguishing of Cleopatra's hopes. She was a queen who had danced with empires, loved by the most powerful men of her time, yet now she faced the end with a quiet resolve. Her thoughts turned inward, to the children she would leave behind, to the legacy she had fought so hard to protect. The weight of the world, once hers to command, now pressed upon her shoulders with a finality that she could not escape. Cleopatra knew that her time was drawing near, that the sands of her life were slipping away. But in those final days, she remained a queen in every sense, planning her last act with the same care and dignity that had marked her reign. In the quiet shadows of her chamber, Cleopatra prepared to meet her end, not with fear, but with the grace of a ruler who had lived and would die on her own terms. In the dim chambers of her palace, where the echoes of past glories mingled with the silence of defeat, Cleopatra made her final decision. The weight of the world seemed to press down upon her as she pondered her fate. The golden queen of Egypt, who had danced with destiny, now found herself at the edge of a precipice, with no path forward but one. The thought of chains, of humiliation before the Roman crowds, was a bitter poison she could not swallow. Cleopatra had always been a queen of her own making, and she would not allow her story to be written by the hands of her conquerors. And so, in the quiet of that fading afternoon, she chose to meet death on her own terms. Legend tells of the asp, a serpent coiled in the folds of a basket, brought to her with the solemnity of a final rite. Cleopatra, draped in her finest robes, looked upon the creature not with fear but with acceptance. The asp, a symbol of royalty and eternity, was to be her passage from this world to the next, a final act of defiance and grace. The snake's bite, they say, was swift and gentle, a kiss from the gods to take her from the mortal realm. But the truth, like so much of Cleopatra's life, is shrouded in mystery. Did the asp truly deliver her to the afterlife? Or was it a vial of poison, carefully prepared to ensure a peaceful departure? Perhaps it was neither, or perhaps both. Historians and poets have debated the details for centuries, each version adding to the legend that is Cleopatra. What is certain is that Cleopatra left this world as she lived in it, on her own terms, with the pride and dignity befitting a queen. Her death was not merely an end, but a statement, a final chapter that secured her place in history. In choosing her own exit, Cleopatra ensured that she would not be paraded through Rome, a mere trophy of war, but would remain forever the queen who commanded the hearts of men and the respect of history. As the night fell over Alexandria, Cleopatra's body lay still, but her spirit, unbroken, took flight. The mystery of her death became a part of her legend, whispered in the winds of the Nile and echoed in the annals of time. Her name, Cleopatra, would be remembered not just as a ruler, but as a symbol of strength, beauty, and the indomitable will of a queen who would not bow. As the sun dipped below the horizon of ancient Alexandria, casting long shadows across the palace walls, Cleopatra lay in stillness. The once mighty queen, who had ruled over the sands of Egypt and the hearts of men, now faced the twilight of her reign. Her life, a tapestry woven with threads of love, ambition, and tragedy, was nearing its final knot. In the quiet aftermath of her passing, Egypt, the land of the Nile, where the gods themselves once walked, was forever changed. With Cleopatra's last breath, the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which had guided Egypt's fate for 3 centuries, came to a gentle yet irrevocable end. The dynasty that had once brought the knowledge of the Greeks to mingle with the mysteries of Egypt now faded like a distant dream. Rome, that ever-hungry beast, stretched its shadow over the golden sands. With the fall of Cleopatra, Egypt became Rome's prized jewel, a province ruled not by kings or queens, but by the iron hand of the emperor. The great libraries of Alexandria, where wisdom danced on papyrus scrolls, now echoed with the footfalls of Roman soldiers. Yet even as the legions marched, the whispers of Cleopatra's name lingered in the cool night air, a soft murmur of what had been. The wealth of Egypt, her grains, her treasures, her art, all flowed towards Rome, filling the coffers of a new era. The Nile, once a river of gods, now served a different master. Yet the soul of Egypt, the magic of her past, clung to her people like the dew on morning reeds, refusing to be forgotten. Cleopatra, in her final act, had sought to preserve her legacy, to leave behind a memory unmarred by the chains of defeat. Her death was not just the end of a queen, but the closing of a chapter in the book of history, a chapter that would be retold for millennia. In the flicker of candlelight and the rustle of parchment, Rome's victory was complete, and with it, the Republic faded into the annals of time, making way for an empire. Octavian, now Augustus, the first emperor, would rule with the strength of a man who had conquered both land and legend. Yet in the heart of Egypt, in the echoes of the pyramids and the still waters of the Nile, Cleopatra's spirit remained, a reminder of a time when a queen dared to stand against the tide of history. And so, as the night deepens and the stars shimmer above, the tale of Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, draws to a close. But like all stories worth telling, it lingers like a soft lullaby in the minds of those who listen, carrying them gently into dreams of distant lands and ancient times. In the stillness of night, when the world quiets and the stars whisper ancient tales, Cleopatra's legacy rises like a soft breeze through the ages. Though her reign ended millennia ago, her story has woven itself into the very fabric of history, a tale told and retold, never losing its allure. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, left behind more than just a kingdom. She left a mark on the hearts and minds of those who would come after her. Her life, a blend of power, love, and tragedy, has inspired artists, poets, and storytellers for centuries. From the grand halls of Rome to the libraries of Alexandria, her name has been etched in the annals of time, her story a testament to the enduring nature of true greatness. In art, she is painted as the epitome of beauty and strength, a queen who commanded the loyalty of armies and the hearts of the most powerful men. In literature, her tale has been spun into plays and poems, each word adding to the mystique that surrounds her. Cleopatra is not just remembered, she is revered, a symbol of the complex dance between power and grace. Even as the world changed around her, Cleopatra's image remained steadfast, unyielding to the sands of time. In the Renaissance, she was reborn in the works of Shakespeare and the brushstrokes of great painters, her story told with a reverence that echoed through the centuries. In modern times, she has graced the silver screen, her legend brought to life by the great actresses of our era, each portrayal adding a new layer to her enduring mystique. But more than just a figure of history, Cleopatra has become a symbol of the power that women can wield, of the intelligence that commands respect, and of the beauty that can inspire devotion. Her legacy is a tapestry, rich with the colors of her life, a story that continues to be told, generation after generation, as fresh and vibrant as the day it was first spun. And so, as the night deepens and dreams take flight, Cleopatra's legacy drifts through the ages, a lullaby of history, singing softly to those who listen, carrying them gently into the realms of sleep, where the past and present intertwine. As the sands of time have shifted, so too has the story of Cleopatra, shaped and reshaped by the hands of historians, artists, and storytellers. Each era has painted her in new colors, reflecting the values and beliefs of the time. In the eyes of ancient Rome, Cleopatra was a seductress, a queen who wielded her beauty like a weapon, ensnaring powerful men and threatening the very heart of the Republic. Roman historians, writing from the perspective of the victors, cast her as a dangerous foreign queen, her allure a symbol of the chaos that could befall Rome if its leaders strayed from the path of duty. She was portrayed as the ultimate femme fatale, whose charms led to the downfall of Mark Antony, and nearly Rome itself. But history is not static, and neither is Cleopatra's legacy. As the centuries passed, the narrative around her began to shift. In the Renaissance, she emerged as a tragic heroine, a figure of beauty and love, immortalized in the works of Shakespeare and countless artists. Her story became one of romance and sorrow, a queen who loved deeply and lost everything in the name of that love. In more recent times, Cleopatra has been reclaimed as a symbol of female power and intelligence. Modern historians have looked beyond the Roman propaganda to uncover the truth of her reign. Cleopatra, as a shrewd and capable ruler, a woman who spoke multiple languages, who commanded armies, and who sought to protect her kingdom in the face of overwhelming odds. She is celebrated not just for her beauty, but for her wit, her political acumen, and her unyielding spirit. Each generation has found something new in Cleopatra's story, a reflection of their own hopes, fears, and ideals. And so, her legacy continues to evolve, a mirror held up to history, showing us not just who Cleopatra was, but who we are, and who we aspire to be. And as the night deepens, this tale of a queen who has transcended time becomes a gentle lullaby, carrying those who listen into the realms of sleep, where history and dreams intertwine.